The mining station's emergency beacon screamed across the void for exactly 17 minutes before it died. By then, the Zerion Imperial fleet had already moved on, leaving behind twisted metal and floating debris where 300 human workers had been extracting rare minerals from the asteroid belt near Proxima Station. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Retribution, his weathered hands gripping the tactical display as the final distress signals faded to static. The holographic remains of Mining Platform 7 rotated slowly before him, each piece of wreckage telling a story of overwhelming alien firepower used against defenseless civilians. "Sir, we're receiving communication from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Torres, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Morrison nodded grimly. He knew what was coming. The Zerion Empire had been testing human resolve for months, probing their defenses, studying their responses. This attack on civilians marked a clear escalation, one that demanded a response the aliens would never expect. "Put it through," he ordered. Admiral Richardson's stern face materialized in the hologram. Behind him, the bustling activity of Earth's most secure military facility continued around the clock. "Jake, I'm sure you've seen the carnage. The Zerians think we're soft targets, that our miners and engineers are defenseless prey." "They're about to learn otherwise," Morrison replied, though his heart ached thinking of the families who would never see their loved ones return home. "Indeed they are. We're sending Jenna." Morrison felt his pulse quicken. Jenna Hayes represented everything the Earth Defense Force had achieved in creating the perfect operative. Brilliant engineer, deadly combatant, and possessing an uncanny ability to turn any situation to humanity's advantage. She was also his former student, someone he'd trained personally before she surpassed even his expectations. "What's the mission profile?" he asked, already knowing it would be something impossibly dangerous. "The Zerion command ship that led the attack is the Dominion's Pride, captained by Zeth Koran. Intelligence indicates they're conducting research on human technology they've scavenged. Jenna will infiltrate as a captured engineer, then show them exactly what human ingenuity can accomplish." 3 days later, Jenna Hayes drifted in a damaged escape pod toward the massive Zerion vessel. Her auburn hair was matted with artificial blood, her engineer's jumpsuit torn and stained to suggest she was a survivor from the mining station attack. Hidden beneath the damaged fabric were tools and devices that would have impressed even her former mentor. The Zerion ship was a marvel of alien engineering, its organic curves and crystalline structures creating an almost beautiful silhouette against the stars. Jenna admired the craftsmanship even as she prepared to use it against them. Beauty was no protection against human determination. Captain Zeth Koran received the report of the human survivor with mild interest. The Zerions were a proud species. Their elongated frames and sharp features evolved for their high gravity, homeworld. Their military tradition emphasized honor and strength, traits they believed the soft, short-lived humans lacked entirely. Another scavenger from the mining platform reported his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Thane. The humans seem incapable of learning when they're outmatched. Koran nodded absently, his attention focused on the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. The creatures were regrouping, but their response seemed typically scattered and defensive. "Bring her to the engineering bay. Perhaps our scientists can learn something useful from interrogating her." What Koran didn't expect was the woman who was eventually dragged before him in the ship's main laboratory. Despite her disheveled appearance, Jenna Hayes moved with a confidence that immediately caught his attention. Her green eyes showed no fear, only a calculating intelligence that made him pause. Dr. Nix Stellaris, the ship's chief scientist, approached the human with obvious fascination. The Zerion female was smaller than the military officers, her silver hair marking her as one of their intellectual class. "Remarkable," she murmured, circling Jenna like she was studying a particularly interesting specimen. "The bone density is much lower than our estimates suggested, yet the muscle development indicates significant physical capability." "I'm standing right here," Jenna said calmly, her voice carrying just enough edge to make several guards shift uncomfortably. "If you want to know about human physiology, Just ask. Corin stepped forward, intrigued despite himself. Most captured humans either cowered in terror or raged helplessly. This one seemed almost amused by her situation. You show remarkable composure for someone whose entire settlement was just destroyed. Death comes to everyone eventually, Jenna replied, meeting his gaze directly. The question is whether you accomplish something meaningful before it arrives. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Corin found himself studying this human more carefully, noting the way she held herself, the subtle ways her eyes tracked the room's layout and the positions of every guard and scientist. She was planning something, and somehow that realization only increased his fascination. "What's your function?" he asked. "On the mining platform." "Systems engineer," Jenna answered truthfully. "I keep things running that other people can't fix." Dr. Stellaris's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating. Your species' approach to technology is so improvisational. We've studied the wreckage from your settlements, and the jury-rigged solutions are surprisingly elegant." "We make do with what we have," Jenna said simply. "It's a survival trait." Over the following days, Jenna was given limited freedom to move around the engineering sections of the ship, ostensibly so the Xerian scientists could observe her interactions with their technology. What they didn't realize was that every moment of access was an opportunity for her to understand their systems more completely than they understood them themselves. The Xerian technology was indeed impressive, but it relied heavily on centralized control systems and standardized components. Everything was designed to work perfectly within established parameters, with little flexibility for adaptation or improvisation. It was exactly the kind of rigid thinking that Jenna had been trained to exploit. Captain Corin found himself making excuses to visit the engineering sections where the human was being studied. He told himself it was merely professional interest, but there was something about her quiet confidence and unexpected insights that drew him back repeatedly. When she suggested a modification to their power distribution system that increased efficiency by 12%, he began to suspect there was far more to this human than anyone had realized. "Your people underestimate you," he told her during one of these visits, finding her working on a diagnostic panel with tools she'd somehow acquired. "Most people underestimate most other people," Jenna replied without looking up from her work. "It's usually a mistake. And yet you seem remarkably calm for someone who's been captured by an enemy force." Finally, she looked at him directly, and Corin felt something unexpected stir in his chest. There was intelligence in those green eyes, but also a kind of fierce determination that he'd never encountered before. "Captain Corin, isn't it? I've heard your crew mention you. They respect you." "As they should," he replied, though her directness made him slightly uncomfortable. "Respect has to be earned," Jenna said quietly. "Just like trust. Just like victory." That night, as Corin reviewed the ship's status reports, he found his thoughts returning to the human engineer. There was something about her that challenged his assumptions, not just about her species, but about strength itself. The Xerians valued physical power and military dominance, but this small human possessed a different kind of strength entirely. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ship's engineering section, Jenna worked by the light of diagnostic displays, her hands moving with practiced precision as she made subtle modifications to systems throughout the vessel. The Xerians saw her as a curiosity, a primitive creature to be studied and eventually discarded. They had no idea they were watching humanity's most dangerous weapon, carefully taking apart their most powerful ship from the inside. Tomorrow, she decided it would be time to show them exactly what human engineering could accomplish when properly motivated. The thought brought a small smile to her face as she put away her improvised tools and prepared for what would either be a spectacular victory or a glorious end. Either way, Captain Zeth Corin and his crew were about to discover that underestimating humans was indeed a very serious mistake. The first sign that something had changed aboard the Dominion's Pride came at a 400 ship time, when the artificial gravity fluctuated just enough to make Captain Zeth Corin's morning routine slightly more challenging. By 0430, 3 separate departments had reported minor system anomalies that their technicians couldn't identify. By 0500, Corin was standing in the main engineering bay, watching his chief engineer struggle with control panels that seemed to have developed minds of their own. "Captain, I don't understand it," Chief Engineer Vex reported, his normally confident demeanor showing cracks. "The systems respond to our commands, but with delays and variations we've never seen before. It's as if something is interpreting our requests and modifying them." Coran's eyes found Jenna Hayes immediately. She was working at a secondary console, apparently focused on some routine diagnostic, but he noticed the slight curve of her lips that suggested barely suppressed amusement. In that moment, he realized that his ship was no longer entirely under his control. "Human," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Explain what you've done to my ship." Jenna looked up with an expression of perfect innocence. "I've been running diagnostics and making minor efficiency improvements just like Dr. Stellaris requested. Your power distribution is now optimized. Your environmental systems are running smoother, and your navigation computers are processing route calculations 17% faster. And in exchange for these improvements, what have you taken from us?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the engineering bay, Xerian technicians had stopped their work to listen. Dr. Stellaris entered at that moment, her scientific curiosity evident as she sensed the tension. "I haven't taken anything, Captain," Jenna replied, stepping away from the console to face him directly. "I've given you something much more valuable than efficient power distribution, which is a choice." Before Coran could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lighting bathed the engineering bay in red as his communications officer's voice echoed over the internal systems. "Captain, to the bridge immediately. We have multiple human vessels approaching at high speed." Corin's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but Jenna made no threatening moves. Instead, she simply stood there with that same confident calm that had intrigued him from their first meeting. "The choice I mentioned," she said quietly. "Your communications are still working. Your weapons are still functional. Your engines could take you anywhere in the galaxy. But every system on this ship now responds to human override codes. The question is whether you want to use those systems to continue a war you can't win, or to begin a conversation that might benefit both our species." Dr. Stellaris stepped forward, her scientific mind clearly racing. "You've integrated human programming into our core systems without us detecting it. The theoretical implications alone are fascinating, I'm sure," Jenna agreed. "But right, now Captain Corin has to decide whether he wants to be remembered as the Xerion who started a war, or the one who prevented one." Corin felt something he rarely experienced: genuine uncertainty. This human had outmaneuvered him completely, not through superior firepower but through intelligence and planning that impressed him despite his situation. More disturbing was his growing realization that he didn't want to see her harmed in whatever was about to happen. "Bridge to Captain Corin," came the urgent communication. "The human fleet is requesting permission to come aboard. They're specifically asking for the safe return of someone called Jenna Hayes." "Tell them," Jenna said softly, "that Jenna Hayes is exactly where she wants to be, having exactly the conversation she came here to have." The bridge doors opened to reveal Commander Jake Morrison flanked by 2 human soldiers, but their weapons remained holstered. Behind them came a figure that made several Xerian officers step back in surprise: Princess Vera Nexus, heir to the Xerian throne, her elegant form unmistakable even in practical military attire. "Princess," Corin said, snapping to attention despite his confusion, "I wasn't informed you were in this sector." "I came as soon as I received word of first contact with human leadership," Vara replied, her voice carrying the authority of royalty, but also genuine curiosity. "I wanted to assess the situation personally." Morrison's eyes found Jenna immediately, and his relief was obvious. "Agent Hayes, status report." "Mission successful, sir. The Xerian Empire now has a complete understanding of human technical capabilities, and Captain Corin has been given options for how to proceed. Options that apparently include surrendering my ship to human control," Corin said, though his tone carried more resignation than anger. "Not surrendering, Jenna. corrected. Sharing. Your ship is still yours, Captain, but now it's also equipped with human innovations that make it more capable than it was before. The question is whether you want to use those capabilities to fight us or work with us. Dr. Stellaris had been examining the diagnostic readouts with growing amazement. Captain, the improvements she's made are extraordinary. Our shield efficiency has increased by 23%. Our weapon accuracy has improved across all systems, and our life support can now sustain 40%. More personnel for extended missions. Morrison stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident. Captain Corin, Princess Vara, I propose we move this discussion to more comfortable surroundings. Perhaps we can find a solution that benefits everyone involved. Over the following hours, as representatives from both species gathered in the ship's conference room, unexpected connections began to form. Captain Corin found himself drawn into detailed technical discussions with Jenna, their initial adversarial relationship, evolving into something that felt remarkably like mutual respect. Her intelligence challenged him in ways he'd never experienced, while her subtle confidence suggested depths he wanted to explore. Your approach to problem-solving is unlike anything we've encountered, he admitted during a brief break in negotiations. You see possibilities where we see only established protocols. Maybe that's because we had to learn to see possibilities, Jenna replied. When you're the underdog, creativity becomes survival. Princess Vera had become equally fascinated with Commander Morrison, whose diplomatic skills impressed her even as his obvious care for his subordinates revealed a leadership style very different from traditional Zarian hierarchy. When he spoke about human values and the importance of protecting civilian populations, she found herself questioning assumptions she'd held her entire life. Your people fight for each other, she observed. Not just for territory or resources, but for the idea that every individual matters. That's what makes us strong, Morrison replied. Not our technology or our tactics, but our willingness to risk everything for each other. Dr. Stellaris had spent the entire day in animated discussion with Jenna about human engineering philosophy, her scientific curiosity thoroughly engaged by concepts she'd never considered. The idea that limitations could inspire innovation, rather than simply defining boundaries, was revolutionizing her understanding of technological development. As evening approached by ship time, Corin found himself alone with Jenna on one of the observation decks looking out at the stars that had once represented the divide between their species. What happens now? He asked. That depends on what you want to happen, she replied. Your empire can continue trying to conquer human space, but now you know that every battle will cost more than you expect, or we find ways to work together. Your people have technologies and perspectives that could help humanity. Our approaches to problem-solving could benefit your civilization. The question is whether pride is more important than progress. Corin studied her profile in the starlight, noting the strength in her features and the way she seemed to carry herself with absolute confidence in her abilities. And what about us? What happens between a Zarion captain and a human agent when their governments are no longer enemies? Jenna turned to face him directly, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. I suppose we'd have to figure that out as we go along. I've never tried having a relationship with someone from another species. Neither have I, he admitted. But I find myself curious about the possibilities. Curiosity is a good start, she said softly, stepping closer to him. It's what brought me here in the first place. When their lips met, it was with the same kind of experimental caution that characterized everything else about their interaction. Two beings from different worlds exploring uncharted territory together. But the warmth that spread through both of them suggested that some connections transcended species boundaries. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, Princess Vera and Commander Morrison were discovering their own unexpected compatibility. Their conversation had evolved from diplomatic necessity to genuine personal interest, each finding in the other qualities that challenged and attracted them. Your people's capacity for adaptation is remarkable, Vera said. We Zarians pride ourselves on perfection, but perhaps there's strength and flexibility we never considered. And your people's commitment to excellence is something we admire. Morrison replied. Maybe the best solutions come from combining both approaches. 3 weeks later, the joint human-Zerion research station established in neutral space had become a symbol of what cooperation between their species could achieve. Jenna and Corin worked together daily, their professional partnership deepening into something more personal with each passing day. Their relationship had become a source of fascination for both crews, proof that differences could be strengths rather than obstacles. Dr. Stellaris had requested permanent assignment to the Yirio station, her research into human engineering principles yielding breakthrough after breakthrough. Princess Vara had convinced her father to fund the joint venture, her growing relationship with Morrison providing a personal investment in making the partnership succeed. Standing together on the station's main observation deck, looking out at ships from both fleets working in harmony, Jenna and Corin reflected on how much had changed since their first meeting. You know, Corin said, his arm around her waist, when I first saw you in that escape pod, I thought you were just another human survivor. And when I first met you, I thought you were just another arrogant alien commander. Jenna replied with a smile. Shows how much we both knew. Perhaps that's the most important lesson, he suggested. That understanding someone requires looking beyond first impressions. Or beyond species entirely, she agreed. Some connections are universal. As they watched human and Zerion engineers working side by side on projects that would benefit both civilizations, they knew they had become part of something larger than themselves. Love had indeed proven to be a force that could bridge any divide, while human ingenuity and determination had once again shown that the greatest victories came not from destruction, but from the courage to build something better together. The Daori, war that had threatened to consume both civilizations, had ended before it truly began, replaced by a partnership that promised to unlock possibilities neither species could have achieved alone. And at the heart of it all, the simple truth that had started everything. Never underestimate what humans can accomplish when they're properly motivated by something worth fighting for.